Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melvin Visch, and I'm a solutions engineer at Dynatrace. And today I'll be talking about observability for developers. So let's start setting the stage. My clicker doesn't work. That's a great start. Okay, next page. Okay, let's start with setting the scene. What is developer experience? Well, at its core, it's providing developers with the right environment, tools, and methodologies to build great software with minimal distractions or inefficiencies. Now, what does a developer experience look like? Well, developers today are a jack of all trades that write code, they test, they deliver. And they also have too many tools. It's often that we see stacks of upwards to 20, 30 to 50 tools across complex enterprises. Best of breed is not enough. It requires a steep learning curve, and losing context jumping between tools means that you lose valuable insights when you're on your way. Now, for us, empowering developers is to make sure that they have a simple experience with actionable data they need, including data from production, in a seamless and consistent experience, and they need it just to work. So, let's look at the Dynatrace ecosystem that we are running. Our SaaS software delivery stream is a diverse ecosystem of various tools, showing here just a snapshot and examples of what technologies we use ourselves in our production system with a development team across the world of about 2,500 developers. And this ecosystem is made fully observable with our own platform to avoid flying blind in our software delivery process. Whereas in the past, in the early days of observability, the prime users of observability platforms were the expert users. So think about IT ops, SREs, and DevOps teams who view systems as closed black boxes and care about the well-being of production or how to operate applications. Now, the type of questions they asked were, is the system up? What's the latencies? Are there any errors between different boundaries? Is there an isolation or a domain that we need to zoom into? Concerns like latency, load, consumption are a set of parameters that can be tracked in dashboards or get alerts for, and dealing with these problems usually meant changing configurations. Now, developers would get back to these SREs, DevOps, or IT ops colleagues, and they would get back with logs, local debugging, remote debugging, and that means that you then again have to build up context, look to the view of a developer as an IT ops person. But if we fast forward to today, we see that cloud native is more and more embedded everywhere. More and more requests are there for 5x9s in availability, and systems are getting more complex, including the bugs that are happening are more complex. And we have a gold mine of data to analyze and to provide to various engineers. And suddenly observability is not only for experts like the IT ops teams, but it's also for the ones that build and operate apps and release these on a frequent basis. Now we have SREs, platform engineers, and also developers who are at the core of what an observability platform wants to benefit from. So speaking of developers, they ask different questions. Instead of asking what's the uptime and what's the latency, the question is, how do I fix my bug? Is my feature being used at all? And what happens if this feature is faster or slower to make a proper business impact? And dealing with those problems usually means changing code. The data that we need is not predictable, and therefore the level of insight that the engineers need and the real-time capabilities required to get that insight is also variable, and it depends highly on what the person is looking at. So then we hear a lot of talking about shifting left. So what do we mean with shifting left? It means that we empower developers with real-time production data and reducing redeployments. So who in here in the last half month or half a year has had an issue that they could not reproduce? A production issue? I would say a quarter to a third of the room, and then you can't reproduce it, so you add logs, add additional insight, and then you redeploy your application again, and then either the issue doesn't happen anymore or the information that you get is no longer relevant. And then you go through the cycle again and again. This takes a lot of time, it's a lot of toil, it's work that you preferably don't want to do. So if we talk about observability for developers, it's not about only saying, hey, we want to shift left and empower developers, but there's also a certain feature set that we need to place in there. So let's start with the first feature set. Of course, we're talking about logs, traces, and metrics. These are the pillars of observability that we still need. The biggest difference in there being that these are data sources that tell you something about your runtime code, like your traces, but also the result of your code as the stuff that's being logged or the metrics that are being reported. Now, these should always be viewed in context. It's not advised to only look at the logs and don't check the traces or the metrics. By combining metrics, traces, and logs, you can get a very close and precise overview of what is exactly required. Now, the next block we're going to add here are snapshots, exceptions, and profiling. Continuous profiling, and not only a heavy profile or a dump, helps you in understanding the continuous behavior of your application and helps you to show what kind of risk there is in how you're running it right now. Exceptions are, of course, helping you to see where your application is throwing unexpected behavior and where you can improve on to reduce the noise on your environment. And about snapshots is something that I'll talk about a little later in the live demo. But most importantly, all this data should be available from where? I think a developer would prefer to work in its IDE. Who prefers working in their IDE over a web interface? I would expect a little bit more hands, but I'm happy with this, thank you. So what is also super important is that we are building towards observability for developers in an IDE, so that even if your code isn't live yet, you can already start seeing things. Or if your code is live, that you can actually live hook in from your IDE directly into production to see what's happening. Additionally, we see a lot of movement with Spotify, the backstage integration, where more and more tools are being integrated into one overview within a large platform, so that teams, based on infrastructure as code, can already have observability within their platform right from the get-go. And of course, last but not least, dashboards are still a staple, right? You want to see how is your code behaving. Are there any metrics out of the expected ranges, and or should you build any additional insights? Now I want to step back shortly to the snapshots, because the snapshots is a part that we've recently added within what we call live debugging. So let's say you are on call and you get pulled into an incident, and it's not just an incident you fear, it's a production issue and you need to fix it swiftly. How much time and pressure do you have to invest now to recreate an issue and reproducing or add code or redeploy? In those times, it doesn't matter how much data you have or how advanced your analytics are, most of the times it's not enough. So I wanted to take you through a live demo of how we see live debugging and how it can help you in your journey. So over here I have what we call our Easy Trade application, and it's an application that trades stocks, and it's basically our demo application, and I can show it over here. So it's a simple application. I will log in as James. James can look at his stocks, he can trade them, there's different overviews. He can withdraw some of his balance, and then maybe he wants to find a credit card, or he wants to add a credit card to his account. Oh, there was an error. No stack trace, no details, nothing much to work on. Now, in this case, for a financial institution, not being able to request a credit card means revenue loss. Revenue loss is something that most of the companies want to avoid, so this is something that we have to solve quickly. Now, based from the problem that we have in Dynatrace, we see that it comes from the observability platform. We see that it comes from a specific line of code, and that means that then we can connect from our IDE to the environment that we want to monitor. let's say I would add a live debugging breakpoint here. Now, if I would do this in a normal debugger and I would hook up to production to my only instance of the order controller and I would put in a breakpoint, the whole environment stops. Not something I would like to do. So what we're actually adding is we're adding non-breaking breakpoints. And these non-breaking breakpoints are going to make sure that all the context that is ever hit here gets stored. And then you see some of the hits coming in. Since this is a publicly available application, some of my other colleagues are probably also working on it. As you can see, I'm triggering it a few times. And then from your IDE, we can exactly see where the issue is coming from. Now, the example here is relatively straightforward because we are dividing by 0. But on the right here, you can see a snapshot of exactly all the entries and the items which are happening, which queries are happening, and the full context of your application at that timestamp. Now, what we can also do is we can add more filters, we can add or disable, and we can make sure that what log message is sent is also edited. We can filter on different type of variables, so that means that from your IDE, you can basically filter down and focus on a very specific occurrence of an issue that is happening, and then you can filter on it and leave it running. In this case, you can leave on a breakpoint for a week to make sure that is a specific line of code actually being used in production. Or if you have a if-else construction, you can check exactly how many times the else was hit instead of the if, to make sure that you can make your next choice on optimizing the code a little bit more easier. Now, what I like about this setup is that you can set up a hit limit, so making sure that sometimes you have a service that hits 100 times per minute, then you don't want to collect all of this data and flood your environment with all this data coming in. So you always should set a hit limit, then you set a time limit, and then you can make sure you just make a copy of the data that's on the application. Now there's barely any impact here because we just make a copy of the data that flows through, and once a copy is made, we let it go again. So this means that we aren't interfering with the code itself. It's a simple snapshot of all the context from the code on our machine to the code that's actually running. Now, this code actually never leaves this device. So the code you are instrumenting is not known with the observability platform at the other side, which ensures that your code is still secure and safely running. This means that we can debug applications quickly and easily because we set a non-breaking breakpoint. We can do that either from the web UI or you can do it directly from your IDE. And then it instantly generates a dynamic snapshot, ensuring that you can get your debug data quicker and right from the get-go, which means you don't have to reproduce. The specific issue can trigger, and then after it's triggered, you can resolve it because you get the full context. Now, I've shown you the VS Code plugin that we have, but there's also a VS Code. There's also an IntelliJ plugin. And I think what it mainly means to all the developers that we are helping out with observability is that they don't have to switch between different tools, writing queries to find logs or metrics, missing critical context. And that basically brings it down to what I think observability for developers means, and that is that data in context with more telemetry data in a single click. And with that, I think I have 1 minute for a question, and I saw one hand raised in the middle. So please ask your question. Speak up, please.
Does this affect the speed of your production environment?
So it doesn't. But the reason why it doesn't is you can be very specific to what instance you plug it into. So let's say you have 10 instances or you have 3, then you can select, I want only 1, 2, or 3 instances locked on. And plus, since it's not stopping, it's merely making a copy of the data that's passing through, there is almost zero impact. But since it's a change that's happening and we're observing, of course there is a delay in a very small amount. But it's hard to tell you because it depends very much on the behavior of the application and the language itself. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining, and if you have questions, please find us at the Dynatrace booth.